They sent me a text message while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from surgery. What I discovered next made me realize their cruelty went far deeper than neglect. I'm grateful you're here to listen. Follow my story until the end and comment what country you're watching from so I can see how far this reaches. At 72 years old, I thought I knew what loneliness felt like, but nothing prepared me for the betrayal waiting in that hospital room. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, and if someone had told me 6 months ago that recovering from emergency surgery would become the catalyst for uncovering the darkest secrets of my family, I would have laughed. But life has a cruel sense of timing, doesn't it? I live in a small Cape Cod-style house on Maple Ridge Avenue in the town of Bristow, about 40 miles north of the state capital. It's a quiet neighborhood where people still wave to each other from their porches and remember when the corner store was a blacksmith shop. I've lived here for 37 years, ever since my late husband Gerald and I moved from the city when our son was just a toddler. The house holds a lifetime of memories. Gerald's workshop in the garage, where he spent countless weekends building furniture, the kitchen, where I taught our son Julian how to make his grandmother's apple pie recipe, the garden that stretches across the backyard, my pride and joy, where I grow heirloom tomatoes, basil, lavender, and roses that bloom from May through October. That garden is where this story really begins. It was a Tuesday in late September, one of those perfect autumn days when the heat of summer has finally broken but winter's chill hasn't yet arrived. The afternoon sun painted everything gold, and I'd spent the better part of 3 hours working in the garden, preparing the beds for winter, pulling up spent tomato plants, trimming back the lavender, covering the more delicate perennials with mulch. I remember feeling a slight discomfort in my right side as I worked, just above my hip. Nothing dramatic, just a dull ache that I attributed to bending and kneeling too much. At 72, my body doesn't bounce back from physical labor the way it once did. I took a break, drank some water, and went back to work. By evening, the ache had become sharper. I made myself a light dinner of soup and toast, but couldn't finish it. The pain was spreading, becoming more insistent. I tried lying down, but that made it worse. I tried a heating pad. I tried the pain medication left over from when I'd hurt my back the previous year. Nothing helped. Around 9 o'clock, I called my neighbor Beatrice Cardwell. Beatrice and her husband Arnold have lived next door for 15 years. She's one of those rare neighbors who feels more like family than the actual family you were born with. "Bea," I said when she answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I'm having some pain and I'm not sure what to do." She was at my door in less than 3 minutes, still in her bathrobe and slippers. One look at my face and she made the decision I'd been too stubborn to make myself. "I'm calling an ambulance, Eleanor." No arguments. The pain had become so intense by that point that I couldn't have argued even if I'd wanted to. I sat hunched over in my kitchen chair, arms wrapped around my middle, feeling waves of nausea rolling through me. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. I remember the paramedics being kind and efficient, asking me questions I could barely focus on answering. They loaded me onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled me out of my house, I caught a glimpse of Beatrice standing on my front porch, her hand over her mouth, worry etched across her face. "I'll call Julian," she called out as they loaded me into the ambulance. "Don't you worry about anything." The ride to St. Raphael's Medical Center is mostly a blur. Bright lights, the wail of the siren, a young paramedic with kind eyes telling me to hang on, that we'd be there soon. The pain had reached a crescendo that made it hard to think about anything else. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Emergency room, intake forms that someone else filled out because my hands were shaking too badly, tests, scans, doctors conferring in low voices outside my curtain area. The words I caught didn't mean much to me. Inflammation, infection, surgery, acute cholecystitis. Finally, a surgeon appeared, Dr. Patricia Moreno, a woman in her 50s with silver streaking through her black hair and the calm demeanor of someone who'd delivered bad news thousands of times. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, pulling up a chair beside my bed, "your gallbladder is severely inflamed and infected. We need to remove it tonight. It's not something we can wait on. Do you understand? I nodded, though in truth, everything felt distant and unreal. Surgery. Tonight. Emergency. Do you have family we should contact? Dr. Morano asked gently. My son, I managed. Julian. Julian Whitfield. He lives in Riverside Heights. Riverside Heights was the upscale neighborhood about 30 minutes away where Julian had bought a house 3 years ago with his wife, Simone. A beautiful modern home with a pool and a 3-car garage, the kind of place I never imagined my son would be able to afford on his marketing manager salary alone. But Simone came from money, old family wealth that had given them a lifestyle I could only marvel at. We'll make sure someone reaches out to him, Dr. Morano assured me. But right now, I need you to sign consent forms for the surgery. We're going to take excellent care of you. The next few hours dissolved into fragments. The bright lights of the operating room, the anesthesiologist's voice counting backwards, the antiseptic smell of the surgical suite. Then nothing. I woke up in the recovery ward feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mouth was dry as sand, my throat raw from the breathing tube, and my abdomen ached with a deep, burning pain that medication could only dull, not eliminate. A nurse I didn't recognize was checking monitors beside my bed. "Welcome back, Mrs. Whitfield," she said with a professional smile. "The surgery went very well. You're going to be just fine." Just fine. The words felt hollow. Nothing about being 72 years old, alone in a hospital bed at who knows what hour of the night felt fine. "What time is it?" I croaked. "Just after 2 a.m. You'll be in recovery for another hour or so, then we'll move you to a room for the night." 2 a.m.? The surgery had taken longer than I'd realized. Or maybe I'd lost time somewhere in the fog of anesthesia. "My son, Julian, is he here?" The nurse checked a clipboard. "I don't show any visitors logged for you yet, but it's the middle of the night. I'm sure family will come during regular visiting hours." I nodded and closed my eyes, too exhausted to feel disappointed yet. Of course Julian wouldn't come at 2 a.m. That would be unreasonable to expect. He probably didn't even know about the surgery yet. The hospital had probably tried to reach him, but he was sleeping, his phone on silent like he always kept it at night. They moved me to a room around 3:30 a.m., room 412, on the 4th floor of the surgical wing. It was a semi-private room, but the other bed was empty, giving me the space to myself. The nurse who settled me, a kind-faced woman named Maria, made sure I was comfortable and showed me how to use the call button if I needed anything. "Try to get some rest," she advised. "The doctor will be by in the morning to check on you." But sleep wouldn't come. I lay in that narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles and the harsh fluorescent light bleeding in from the hallway, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a hospital at night. The beep of monitors from other rooms, the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, distant conversations at the nurses' station, a phone ringing somewhere. My phone? Where was my phone? I fumbled around the bedside table until I found it, still in the small plastic bag they'd given me for my personal belongings. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. 4:47 a.m. I had 3 missed calls from Beatrice and 2 text messages from her. "Eleanor, the ambulance just left with you. I'm so worried. Please have someone let me know you're okay." "I tried calling Julian's number from your emergency contact list, but no answer. I'll try again in the morning, praying for you, dear." Sweet Beatrice. Even in the middle of the night, she was thinking of me. I should call Julian. I should let him know what happened, but it was nearly 5 a.m. He'd be asleep. Simone would be furious if I woke them this early. I decided to wait until a more reasonable hour and send a text message instead. At 6:30 a.m., as dawn light began creeping through the window, I composed a message to my son. "Julian, I'm at St. Raphael Medical Center. Had emergency gallbladder surgery last night. I'm in room 412. Everything went well, but I'm quite sore. Could you come when you have a chance? Love, Mom." I read it over 3 times before sending it. It sounded calm, I thought. Not dramatic or demanding, just a simple update and a gentle request. Could you come when you have a chance? Not, you must come immediately, or I need you here immediately. Just when you have a chance. I pressed send and set the phone on the bedside table. And then I waited. Breakfast arrived at 7:30. Watery scrambled eggs, dry toast, a container of orange juice, and red gelatin that wobbled when I moved the tray. I managed a few bites of toast before the nausea made me stop. The incisions in my abdomen throbbed with every movement, every breath. Dr. Morano came by during her morning rounds at 8:45. She checked my incisions, asked about my pain level, and seemed satisfied with my recovery so far. You'll need to stay at least through tomorrow, maybe Friday as well, depending on how you progress. Do you have someone who can stay with you for a few days once you're discharged? You shouldn't be alone. My son will help, I said automatically, though Julian hadn't responded to my text yet. He lives nearby. Good. Make sure he understands you'll need assistance with basic tasks for at least a week. No heavy lifting, no driving, no strenuous activity. Your body needs time to heal. After she left, I checked my phone again. 9:15 a.m. No response from Julian, but it was still early. He was probably getting ready for work. He'd respond once he got to the office. Beatrice called at 9:30. Eleanor, thank God. I've been worried sick. How are you feeling? Hearing her voice made tears spring to my eyes. I'm okay, Bea. Surgery went well. They removed my gallbladder. Have you talked to Julian? I tried calling him last night but couldn't reach him. I texted him this morning. I'm sure he'll respond soon. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I'm sure he will, dear. Is there anything you need? I can bring you some things from your house. Your own pajamas, maybe? Some books? That would be wonderful, I said, grateful beyond words for this woman who wasn't even family but who cared more than I wanted to admit. Beatrice arrived around 11 with a small overnight bag. She'd packed my favorite nightgown, my reading glasses, 3 books from my nightstand, my hairbrush, and even the framed photo of Gerald that usually sat on my bedside table. She said, I didn't know what you'd want, but I figured some things from home might make you feel better. I thought you were an angel, Bea. She sat in the chair beside my bed for a while, chatting about neighborhood news and her grandchildren's latest antics, filling the room with warmth and normalcy. When she finally had to leave to pick up her grandson from preschool, she squeezed my hand. You call me if you need anything. And I mean anything, Eleanor. Promise? I promise. After she left, the room felt emptier than before. I checked my phone again. 12:43 p.m. Still no response from Julian. I told myself not to worry. He was probably in meetings. You couldn't always check your phone during work hours, especially in his position. He'd respond at lunch or maybe after work. Lunch came and went. A sandwich I couldn't eat, soup I managed half of, more gelatin. The afternoon dragged by in a haze of pain medication and forced naps. Each time I woke, I reached for my phone first thing, hoping to see Julian's name on the screen. Nothing. At 4:30 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. My heart leapt. Julian. I grabbed the phone, wincing at the pull in my abdomen, and read the message. Hey, Mom. Sorry to hear that. Hope you're feeling better. Simone and I are swamped with work this week. We'll try to stop by when things calm down. Rest up. Blue heart? I stared at those words until they blurred. Sorry to hear that. Like I told him about a minor inconvenience. A canceled dinner reservation, a rained-out picnic. Hope you're feeling better. Present tense, as if I'd already recovered in the 8 hours since I'd texted him. We'll try to stop by when things calm down. Try? When things calm down? Not, we'll be there as soon as we can. Not, we're leaving work early. Not even, what room are you in so we can visit tonight? Try to stop by. I read the message 3 more times, each reading hollowing out a deeper space in my chest. This was my son, my only child, the baby I'd carried for 9 months,
labored 36 hours to bring into the world. The toddler I walked to his first day of school. The teenager I sat up worrying about when he missed curfew. The young man I'd helped pack for college, his eyes bright with excitement about his future. This was the son I'd raised alone after Gerald died of a heart attack 5 years ago, when Julian was 34. The son I'd leaned on during my grief, who'd promised me I'd never be alone, that he'd always be there for me. And he'd responded to my emergency surgery with an emoji? I set the phone down carefully on the bedside table, screen facing down, and turned my head toward the window. The view was nothing special, just the parking lot 4 floors below and the bland brick facade of the medical building across the way. But I stared at it anyway, watching the afternoon light fade into evening, watching people come and go from the hospital, reuniting with family members, hugging, helping each other to cars. I didn't cry. Not yet. The hurt was too deep for tears yet. It sat in my chest like a stone, cold and heavy. A nurse came to check my vitals, a different one this time, younger, with bright purple scrubs and a nose piercing. She made small talk while she worked, commenting on the weather, asking if I needed more pain medication. I answered on autopilot, not really hearing my own words. After she left, I reached for my phone again. Maybe I'd misread the message. Maybe it seemed worse than it actually was because I was medicated and emotional. But no, the words were exactly as cold and dismissive as I'd thought. My thumb hovered over Julian's name. I could call him. I could tell him how much I needed him, how scared I'd been, how lonely I felt. I could ask him directly to come visit. But something stopped me. Some small voice of dignity or self-preservation that whispered, "If you have to beg your own child to visit you in the hospital, what does that say about your relationship?" I put the phone back down. Dinner arrived at 6. I didn't touch it. Beatrice called at 7 to check on me. I told her I was fine, that Julian had texted. I didn't tell her what the text had said. I couldn't bear to hear the pity that would seep into her voice, or worse, the anger on my behalf. The evenings stretched out endlessly. I tried to read one of the books Beatrice had brought, but the words swam meaninglessly across the page. I flipped through channels on the TV mounted to the wall, but nothing held my attention. Everything felt muted, distant, like I was experiencing life from behind thick glass. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Another message from Julian. "Glad the surgery went well. Make sure you're following doctor's orders." I stared at it. He hadn't even asked what the doctor's orders were, hadn't asked about my pain level, my prognosis, when I'd be discharged, just a generic, could apply to anyone statement about following orders. I didn't respond. That night, I barely slept. Every time I started to drift off, I'd wake with a start, disoriented. The unfamiliar sounds and smells of the hospital jarring me back to consciousness. And each time, I'd reach for my phone, checking for messages that didn't come. Wednesday crawled by in much the same way. Dr. Moreno came by in the morning and pronounced my recovery on track. A physical therapist visited to help me walk the hallway, making sure I could move safely before discharge. The pain was still significant, but the medication kept it at a manageable level. Beatrice visited again in the afternoon, bringing fresh flowers she'd cut from her own garden and a container of homemade chicken soup that the nurses agreed to keep in their break room refrigerator for me. "Has Julian been by?" And I could hear the carefully neutral tone she was using. "Not yet. He's very busy with work."
Beatrice's lips pressed together, but she didn't say whatever she was thinking. Instead, she changed the subject, telling me about the neighborhood book club meeting I'd missed and the drama involving Mrs. Henderson's new boyfriend. Around 3 p.m., Julian texted again. "Simone says hi." 3 words. Not even his own words, but his wife's greeting delivered secondhand. I felt something hardening in my chest. Something that had been soft and vulnerable was slowly calcifying into something else. Something that hurt less because it felt less. Thursday morning, Dr. Moreno told me I could go home Friday afternoon if I continued progressing well. "Make sure you have someone to drive you," she reminded me, "and someone to stay with you for at least the first couple days." "My neighbor will drive me," I said. "Not my son, my neighbor." That afternoon, Julian's text arrived at 4:15 p.m. Mom, about your discharge tomorrow, Simone and I have a work conference in Portland this weekend. We're leaving Thursday night. Can you get a taxi home? We can reimburse you. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. A taxi. He wanted his 72-year-old mother, 2 days post-surgery, to take a taxi home from the hospital alone. And he'd reimburse me. As if money was the issue, as if the cost of a taxi was what bothered me about this suggestion. I sat with that message for a long time, an hour, maybe more, watching the numbers on the clock change, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me, feeling something fundamental shifting inside me. This wasn't about Julian being thoughtless. This wasn't about him being too busy or forgetting or not realizing how serious the situation was. This was about priorities, about where I ranked in his life, about whether I mattered enough to inconvenience himself even slightly. And the answer, delivered via text message with an offer of taxi reimbursement, was clear. I called Beatrice. She answered on the first ring, as she always did. Bea, they're discharging me tomorrow afternoon. I hate to ask, but would you be able to drive me home? Of course, Eleanor. What time? Around 2, probably. I'll text you when I know for sure. I'll be there. Don't you even think about taking a taxi. So she'd heard the tension in my voice, or maybe she'd just guessed. Thank you, Bea. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what neighbors are for, dear. There it was again, that phrase, what neighbors are for. Neighbors showed up. Neighbors brought soup and flowers. Neighbors drove you home from the hospital and didn't think twice about it. And your own son, your only child, he sent text messages and offered to reimburse taxi fare. That night, I finally let myself cry. Quiet tears that soaked the thin hospital pillow, the kind of crying that comes from deep disappointment rather than acute pain, the kind that whispers, you are alone, even when you've always known, intellectually, that everyone is ultimately alone. But knowing it and feeling it are two very different things. Thursday morning came with pale autumn sunshine and the bustle of discharge preparations. A nurse I'd never seen before went over my post-op instructions, warning signs to watch for, when to follow up with my regular doctor, how to care for the incisions, what activities to avoid. I nodded and signed forms and accepted printed information sheets, all while a strange numbness settled over me. Beatrice arrived at 1:45, 15 minutes early, with a pillow for the car ride and a smile that didn't quite hide her concern. Are you ready to bust out of this joint? She asked, trying for levity. More than ready. She helped me gather my belongings, packed the flowers into a bag, carried everything while I walked slowly beside her, one hand pressed against my abdomen. The discharge nurse walked us to the entrance with a wheelchair, hospital policy apparently, even though I'd been walking the halls for 2 days. The September air felt shockingly fresh after days of recycled hospital atmosphere. Beatrice had pulled her car right up to the entrance, saving me the walk across the parking lot. She'd even put a blanket on the passenger seat to make it more comfortable. Your chariot awaits, madam, she said, helping me ease into the seat. The drive home took 20 minutes. Beatrice filled the silence with gentle chatter about her daughter's upcoming visit and the fall festival the neighborhood association was planning. I made appropriate noises of interest, but my mind was elsewhere. We pulled up in front of my house, and I felt a wave of relief, so strong it was almost painful. Home. My garden, slightly overgrown from my absence. My front porch with the rocking chair I'd sat in countless evenings. My haven. Beatrice helped me inside, settled me in my recliner, and then revealed that she'd been doing more than just visiting the past few days. Arnold and I took the liberty of stocking your refrigerator, she said, opening it to show me containers of soup, casseroles, fresh fruit, bread, everything I might need for the next week. We also set up this. She pointed to a folding table beside my chair with my phone charger, TV remote, a pitcher of water, pain medication organized in a pillbox, and a handwritten schedule of when to take what. Bea, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just rest and heal. I'll check on you later this evening. And Eleanor. She looked at me seriously. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all, day or night, I mean it. After she left, I sat in my chair, looking around my living room. Everything was exactly as I left it Tuesday evening, a lifetime ago. But I felt like a different person was now sitting in this chair. Someone who understood something I'd been avoiding understanding.
My phone buzzed, a text from Julian. Home safe. Hope recovery goes smoothly. We'll check in next week after we're back from Portland. Take care. I looked at that message for a long time. The casual tone, the breezy assumption that a text message was sufficient contact, the easy promise to check in next week, as if 7 more days was a perfectly reasonable gap in communication with his hospitalized mother. Take care. Like I was a colleague he'd bumped into in the hallway. Like I was an acquaintance he was wrapping up small talk with. Take care. Not, I love you. Not, I wish I could have been there. Not, I'm sorry I couldn't visit. Just take care with an exclamation point, as if enthusiasm and punctuation could substitute for actual care. I didn't respond. For the first time since I'd entered that hospital, I didn't respond to my son's message. I simply set the phone face down on the table beside me and closed my eyes. What I didn't know yet, what I wouldn't discover for several more days, was that Julian's absence hadn't been about work conferences or busy schedules. There was a reason he'd avoided the hospital, a reason he'd kept his distance, a reason he'd hidden behind text messages instead of showing his face. And when I finally discovered what that reason was, every cruel text message, every empty excuse, every moment of abandonment would suddenly make horrible, perfect sense. But that discovery was still ahead of me. For now, I sat in my chair, in my quiet house, recovering from surgery and nursing a wound that had nothing to do with my missing gallbladder. For now, I simply let myself acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. My son had failed me when I needed him most, and something between us had broken that no amount of future apologies could fully repair. The question was whether he even realized what he'd done, or whether he cared enough to try to fix it. I had a feeling I already knew the answer. The weekend passed in a fog of pain medication and forced rest. Saturday morning, I woke in my own bed for the first time in 5 days and felt momentarily disoriented. The familiar ceiling, the soft morning light filtering through my lace curtains, the distant sound of a lawnmower from somewhere in the neighborhood, it all felt surreal after the harsh fluorescence and constant beeping of the hospital. I reached for my phone out of habit. No messages from Julian. It had been over 24 hours since his last text, the one I hadn't responded to. Part of me wondered if my silence would prompt him to actually call, to check if something was wrong. But the phone remained stubbornly quiet. Beatrice came by 3 times that Saturday, bringing meals, checking my incisions, making sure I was taking my medication on schedule. Her husband Arnold stopped by in the evening with their golden retriever, Murphy, who seemed to sense I needed gentle company and lay his head on my lap while I stroked his soft ears. "You're looking better," Arnold said, though I suspected he was being kind. I'd caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror that morning and looked haggard, pale, with dark circles under my eyes that spoke of pain and sleepless nights. I admitted how I felt. I feel about how I look. These things take time. Patricia, that's Arnold's sister-in-law, she had her gallbladder out 2 years ago. Took her a good 3 weeks to feel human again. It was meant to be reassuring, but all I could think was that I'd be going through those 3 weeks essentially alone. Well, not alone. I had Beatrice and Arnold, but without my son, which somehow felt lonelier than being actually alone. Sunday morning brought a text from Julian at 10:47 a.m. "Hey, Mom, back from Portland. Conference was amazing. Hope you had a good weekend. How's the recovery going?" I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes. Hope you had a good weekend. Like I'd been at a spa retreat instead of recovering from surgery.
Like spending 3 days barely able to walk to my own bathroom constituted a good weekend? How's the recovery going? Present progressive tense. Casual. The kind of question you ask someone who had a cold, not major surgery. My fingers moved across the screen almost without conscious thought. Recovery is difficult. I'm in quite a bit of pain and very limited in what I can do. Would you be able to stop by today? I sent it before I could second-guess myself. There, a direct ask. Not a hint, not a hope that he'd volunteer, but an actual request. Surely he couldn't ignore that. The response came 12 minutes later. Ah, that's rough. So Mom and I are pretty wiped from the trip. Maybe sometime this week. Hang in there. Maybe sometime this week. Hang in there. Another emoji. I set the phone down very carefully, as if it might explode if handled roughly. Something inside me was changing, crystallizing into a hard, cold certainty. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This wasn't being busy or stressed or forgetful. This was indifference. This was my son actively choosing not to see me, not to help me, not to be present in any meaningful way during one of the most vulnerable times of my life. Monday brought the visit from the home health nurse, a cheerful woman named Sandra, who checked my incisions, reviewed my medication, and asked probing questions about my pain levels and mobility. She seemed satisfied with my physical progress, but noticed something in my demeanor. "You seem a bit down," she said gently. That's not uncommon after surgery. The combination of pain, limited mobility, and anesthesia after effects can really impact mood. Are you getting support from family? My neighbor has been wonderful, I said, which was true, but not an answer to her actual question.
Sandra's experienced eyes told me she heard what I wasn't saying. It's important to have emotional support during recovery, not just practical help. Do you have someone you can talk to? Family nearby? My son lives about 30 minutes away. That's good. Has he been helping out? The question hung in the air. I could lie, maintain the fiction that everything was fine, that I had a loving, attentive son. Or I could tell the truth. He's been very busy with work, I said finally, choosing a middle path. Sandra nodded slowly. Well, don't hesitate to ask for what you need. People can't help if they don't know you need it. After she left, I sat with that thought. People can't help if they don't know you need it. But I had told Julian I needed him. I'd sent him that text Sunday morning asking directly if he could visit, and he'd said, maybe sometime this week. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Gerald used to say that. It was one of his favorite pieces of wisdom, usually applied to business dealings or friendships that soured. But it applied to family too, didn't it? Julian was showing me exactly who he was, exactly where I ranked in his priorities. The question was whether I was willing to see it. Tuesday afternoon, I was dozing in my recliner when the doorbell rang. My heart leapt for just a moment. Julian? Had he finally come? But when I made my slow, painful way to the door, I found Beatrice's daughter, Michelle, standing on my porch with a large basket. Mrs. Whitfield, Mom told me about your surgery. I'm so sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital. I was out of state for work. Michelle was a lovely woman in her mid-30s, a teacher with 3 young children who somehow always seemed to have energy and warmth to spare. Michelle, you didn't need to come by. Of course I did. You're practically family. She came inside, setting the basket on my kitchen table. It was filled with books, magazines, herbal tea, lavender sachets, and homemade cookies. I know hospital stays are awful and recovery is boring. I thought you might like some things to pass the time. I felt tears prick my eyes at this kindness from someone who was technically just my neighbor's daughter.
Someone who had no obligation to me whatsoever, but who had thought of me, had taken the time to put together this thoughtful gift, had driven over to deliver it in person. "Thank you," I managed. "This is so thoughtful. Are you doing okay? Mom said you're recovering well physically, but—" She trailed off, her kind eyes searching my face. "I'm managing," I said, which was becoming my standard non-answer. "If you need anything at all, please let me or Mom know. We're right next door. It's no trouble." She gave me a gentle hug, careful of my incisions, and then headed back to her car where I could see her youngest strapped into a car seat. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table looking at the basket of kindness from people who owed me nothing, while my own son remained conspicuously absent. Wednesday brought another text from Julian at 11:15 a.m. "How are you doing today, Mom?" I stared at it. 4 days since I'd come home from the hospital. 4 days since I'd directly asked him to visit. And this was what I got. A casual check-in via text message. I didn't respond. Thursday morning, Beatrice brought over a casserole for my lunch and found me sitting at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. "Eleanor," she set the casserole down and pulled out a chair beside me. "What's wrong? Are you in pain? Should I call the doctor?" "No, physically, I'm fine. The pain is manageable." "But emotionally?" I looked at this woman who had known me for 15 years, who had become more family to me than my own blood. "Julian still hasn't visited." The words hung in the air. Beatrice's face went through several expressions: surprise, anger, concern, and finally, a kind of sad understanding. "Not once?" she asked quietly. "Not once. He sent text messages, 7 of them since I went into the hospital, but he hasn't called, hasn't visited, hasn't even asked specific questions about my recovery or what I might need." "Oh, Eleanor." "I asked him directly Sunday to come by. He said maybe sometime this week. It's Thursday." Beatrice's lips pressed into a thin line. "That boy needs a serious talking to." "He's not a boy anymore. He's 39 years old enough to know better." "Then he definitely needs a talking to." Beatrice reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, honey. You deserve so much better than this." "I raised him alone after Gerald died. I worked 2 jobs to pay for his college. I helped him with the down payment on his first apartment. I was there for every milestone, every crisis, every moment he needed support. And when I need him, really, really need him, he can't even be bothered to drive 30 minutes to see his own mother." "Have you told him how you feel?" "What would I say? Please care about me? Please think I'm worth a visit? I shouldn't have to beg my own child to show basic concern." "You're right. You shouldn't have to. But men, especially young men, can be remarkably dense about these things. Maybe he genuinely doesn't understand how much this is hurting you, or maybe he doesn't care enough to think about it." We sat in silence for a moment, then Beatrice said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to call him, to lay out everything I'm feeling, to make him understand, but another part of me thinks if he cared, he'd know, he'd be here, and if he doesn't care enough to show up, then what's the point of explaining it to him?" "You can't build a relationship with someone who won't meet you halfway," Beatrice said gently. "I learned that with my sister. There comes a point where you have to stop making all the effort and see if they'll make any."
After Beatrice left, I thought about that. Stop making the effort. I'd been the one reaching out to Julian for the past year, maybe longer. I'd been the one calling, texting, suggesting we get together. His responses had been increasingly brief, increasingly delayed. Our relationship had been slowly dying, and I'd been the only one trying to revive it. Maybe it was time to stop trying. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. Julian's name on the screen. My heart stuttered. Finally, he was calling. I answered on the third ring. Hello? Hey, Mom. Julian's voice was bright, energetic. How's it going? How's it going? Like we were catching up after a normal week, not after I'd had emergency surgery and spent a week in pain. I'm recovering, I said carefully. That's great. Listen, I've been meaning to get over there, but things have been absolutely insane at work. We're in the middle of a huge product launch, and I've been pulling 12-hour days. You know how it is. I didn't, actually. I'd never been too busy to visit my own mother in the hospital. But I said nothing, waiting to see where this conversation would go. Anyway, Simone and I were thinking we could stop by this weekend, maybe Saturday afternoon. We have a dinner thing Saturday night, but we could probably swing by for a quick visit before that. A quick visit. 7 days after my surgery, and he was offering a quick visit before a dinner thing? What time on Saturday? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Maybe around 4? We'd need to leave by 5 to get ready for the dinner. It's this thing for Simone's work, pretty important. An hour. He was offering me an hour of his time, and only because he happened to be free between other obligations? Okay, I said. Saturday at 4. Perfect. See you then, Mom. Love you. He hung up before I could respond. I sat, holding the phone, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that he was finally coming, anger that it had taken this long, resignation that even now it was clearly an inconvenience for him. But at least he was coming. Maybe when he saw me, saw how difficult recovery was, he'd understand why his absence had hurt so much. Maybe this visit would be a turning point. Friday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. I spent the morning trying to make myself presentable, which was harder than it should have been. My hair needed washing, but bending over the sink sent sharp pains through my abdomen. I settled for pulling it back in a low ponytail. I put on real clothes instead of the pajamas I'd been living in, though even that simple act left me exhausted. Beatrice had cleaned my house earlier in the week, so at least I didn't have to worry about Julian arriving to a mess. Not that he'd probably notice or care, but I had my pride. By 3:35, I was settled in my living room, trying to read and failing to concentrate. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the clock. 3:45, 3:52, 4:03. At 4:17, a car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched Julian and Simone get out of their sleek silver BMW. Julian was wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Simone was in what looked like an expensive workout outfit, all sleek black fabric and strategic cutouts, though I doubted she'd been to a gym. Her honey blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and even from a distance, I could see her makeup was flawless. They walked to my door without hurrying, and I noticed Julian checking his phone before ringing the doorbell. I opened the door, moving slowly because any quick movement still hurt. "Mom!" Julian's smile was bright, but somehow didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in for a brief, awkward hug, careful not to actually touch me too firmly. "You look good." I didn't look good. I looked like someone recovering from surgery, but I let the lie pass. "Hi, Eleanor," Simone said, her smile as polished and artificial as her manicure. She didn't hug me, just gave a little wave. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I said honestly, stepping aside to let them in. They entered my living room with the air of people visiting a historical site they weren't particularly interested in. Julian's eyes swept over the room, the same room he'd grown up in,
like he was seeing it for the first time, or maybe just seeing how much shabbier it looked compared to his modern showcase home. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea?" I asked. "We're fine," Julian said quickly. "Don't worry about hosting us. You should be resting." We all sat down, an awkward silence settling over the room. I waited for Julian to ask about the surgery, about my recovery, about anything substantial. Instead, he pulled out his phone. "Sorry, just need to check something quick," he muttered, thumbs flying over the screen. Simone was also on her phone, scrolling through what looked like Instagram. She made a little huffing sound. "Something wrong?" I asked. "Oh, just this girl I know posting about her vacation in Bali. 3rd tropical vacation this year. Must be nice." "How was Portland?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Portland?" Julian looked up from his phone, confused for a second. "Oh, right, the conference. It was fine. Lots of networking, the usual." "What was the conference about?" "Marketing strategies, digital trends, that kind of thing." He was already looking back at his phone. I tried another angle. "How's work going otherwise?" "Busy. Really busy. They've got me managing 3 major accounts now, and Simone just got a promotion, so we're both pretty swamped." "Congratulations, Simone."
She looked up from her phone. "Thanks. It's been a lot of work, but it's finally paying off." Another silence fell. Julian was typing something on his phone. Simone had gone back to scrolling. Neither of them seemed particularly interested in being here, in talking to me, and asking how I was really doing. Finally, I broke the silence. It was a difficult week. Julian glanced up. What was? The surgery. The recovery. Being alone in the hospital. Oh, right. He pocketed his phone, clearly trying to look attentive. "Yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't make it to the hospital. It was just such bad timing with the conference and everything." "You could have canceled," I said quietly. "It wasn't until the weekend." Julian shifted uncomfortably. "Well, yeah, but it was important for work. These conferences, they're where you make connections, build relationships. Missing it would have been a bad look." A bad look? Visiting his mother in the hospital would have been a bad look? "I'm your mother," I said, hearing my voice crack slightly. "I had emergency surgery. I was alone." "You weren't alone," Simone interjected. "The hospital has staff. That's literally their job." I stared at her, momentarily stunned by the callousness of that statement. "Simone," Julian said in a warning tone. "What? I'm just saying it's not like she was actually alone. She had doctors and nurses. And didn't your neighbor visit?" She looked at me expectantly. "Yes, Beatrice visited." "See, you had people checking on you." Simone said it like this proved her point, like having a neighbor visit was equivalent to having your own child there. "I needed my son," I said, looking directly at Julian. "I needed you." Julian rubbed his face, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was trying to avoid a difficult conversation. "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry, but you have to understand, we have responsibilities, jobs, obligations. We can't just drop everything." "I'm not asking you to drop everything. I'm asking for basic support during a medical crisis." "Medical crisis seems like a strong term," Simone said. "It was gallbladder surgery. They do hundreds of those every day. It's pretty routine." The words hit me like a slap. Pretty routine. Like because it was a common surgery, it didn't matter. Like my pain, my fear, my vulnerability were somehow less valid because other people had also experienced them. "Nothing is routine when you're 72 years old and alone," I said, my voice shaking now. "You're not alone," Julian said quickly. "You have us. You have Beatrice. You have friends." "Do I have you?" The question came out before I could stop it. Because from where I'm sitting, I have a son who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital, who sent text messages instead of calling, who waited a week to show up for an hour-long visit because he had dinner plans. Julian's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, Julian, what about the situation is unfair to you? You're making me feel guilty for living my life. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to make you understand that your behavior hurt me. Simone stood up abruptly. You know what? This is exactly why we hesitated to come, because we knew you'd make it into this big dramatic thing instead of just being grateful that we're here at all. Grateful? I could barely believe what I was hearing. Yes, grateful. Do you know how much Julian does for you? He calls, he texts, he checks in. But it's never enough, is it? You always want more. I want a normal parent-child relationship. I want the child I raised to care enough to visit when I'm in the hospital. Is that really asking too much? Julian stood up too, his face a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. Maybe we should go. Maybe you should, I said, surprising myself with my own words. Maybe you should go to your important dinner and forget about your mother who's recovering from surgery alone? You're being unfair, Julian said. We came, didn't we? We're here. For 45 minutes, after a week, before rushing off to something more important? Everything can't always be about you, Mom, Simone snapped. We have our own lives to live. I looked at my son, standing there in my living room with his expensive clothes and his beautiful wife, and I barely recognized him. This wasn't the boy who used to crawl into my lap when he was scared. This wasn't the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart. This wasn't the young man who'd told me at his father's funeral that we'd always have each other. This was a stranger who looked at me like I was an obligation he resented. You're right, I said quietly. You should go. I wouldn't want to keep you from your dinner. Mom, Julian started, but I held up my hand. No, you've made it very clear where your priorities are. I won't make you feel guilty for them anymore. Go. Enjoy your evening. Julian and Simone exchanged a look. Then he said, We'll call you later this week. Sure, I said, though we both knew it would be a text message at best. They left, and I watched through the window as they got into their BMW and drove away without looking back. The whole visit had lasted less than an hour, and most of it had been spent looking at phones or arguing. I sank back into my chair, feeling more exhausted than any physical exertion. The pain in my abdomen was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. A text from Julian. Sorry things got heated. We know we care about you. Hope you feel better soon. I stared at that message. Hope you feel better soon. Like this was about my physical health. Like the problem was my surgery and not his complete failure to be present for his own mother. I didn't respond. That night, Beatrice came over with dinner and found me sitting in the dark, my untouched phone beside me. Eleanor, what happened? She turned on a lamp and saw my face. Oh, honey, did he come?
He came, I said dully, for 50 minutes, then left for a dinner party. Beatrice sat down beside me and listened while I recounted the awful visit, Simone's cruel comments, Julian's defensiveness, the way they'd made me feel like a burden for wanting basic support. When I finished, Beatrice was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Eleanor, I'm going to say something, and I hope you won't be offended. At this point, nothing could make this worse. Something's not right here. This isn't just about Julian being thoughtless or busy. The way you describe it, the way they both acted, it sounds like avoidance, like they're deliberately keeping their distance. What do you mean? I mean, people avoid things that make them uncomfortable or that they feel guilty about. What if there's something else going on? Something they don't want you to know about? I'd been so wrapped up in my hurt feelings that I hadn't considered this angle. But now that Beatrice said it, certain things started clicking into place. Julian's insistence on texting instead of calling or visiting, Simone's defensiveness, the way they'd both seemed uncomfortable in my house, like they couldn't wait to leave. "What could they possibly be hiding?" I asked. "I don't know," Beatrice admitted, "but I think you need to find out." After she left, I sat with that thought. What could Julian be hiding that would make him avoid his own mother during a health crisis? What secret could be so significant that it would override basic filial duty and compassion? I picked up my phone and opened my text thread with Julian, scrolled back through the messages from the past weeks, past months, looking for clues I might have missed. And that's when I noticed something odd. In the past 6 months, Julian had never invited me to their house. Every interaction had been either via text, phone, or on the rare occasions we met in person at a restaurant or public place. Never their home. I thought back to the last time I'd been to their house. It must have been Christmas? No, Thanksgiving. Nearly 11 months ago. Since then, every holiday, every occasion that might have warranted a family gathering at their home, there had been an excuse. They were traveling, they were renovating, Simone was sick, they had other plans. For almost a year, my son had been keeping me away from his home. Why? I sat with that question as the night deepened around me, and for the first time, a cold suspicion began to form in my mind. Something was very wrong in Julian's life, something he didn't want me to see, and I was going to find out what it was. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the surgery. My body still ached, my energy was still limited, but my mind was sharp with determination. I called Beatrice. "Can you drive me somewhere tomorrow?" "Of course. Where do you need to go?" I hesitated, then said, "Julian's house. I want to see why he's been keeping me away." There was a pause. Then she said, "I'll pick you up at 10 a.m. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. Beatrice pulled into my driveway at exactly 10, and I walked carefully to her car, still moving slowly but steadier than I had been a week ago. "Are you sure about this?" Beatrice asked as we drove toward Riverside Heights. "No," I admitted, "but I need to know what's going on. Something isn't right and I'm tired of being kept in the dark." The drive to Julian's neighborhood took 35 minutes. The houses got progressively larger and more impressive as we drove, each one a showcase of wealth and status. Julian's house was in a newer development, all modern architecture and manicured lawns. Julian's BMW was in the driveway, along with another car I didn't recognize, a red Mercedes coupe. "He's home," Beatrice observed. "It's Monday morning. Shouldn't he be at work?" Good question. Julian had made such a big deal about how busy work was, how he was pulling 12-hour days. So why was his car in the driveway at 10:30 on a Monday morning? As we watched, the front door opened. My heart leapt, thinking Julian was coming out. But it wasn't Julian. It was a woman I'd never seen before. She was youngish, maybe late 20s or early 30s, with long dark hair and wearing what looked like yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. She walked to the red Mercedes, got in, and drove away. I sat frozen in Beatrice's car, my mind trying to process what I'd just seen. "Who was that?" Beatrice asked quietly. "I have no idea." We waited another 10 minutes, but nothing else happened. The house sat quiet and peaceful in the late morning sun, keeping its secrets. "Take me home," I said finally. On the drive back, neither of us spoke much. My mind was racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Who was that woman? Why was she at Julian's house on a Monday morning? Where was Simone? And most importantly, what did any of this have to do with Julian's avoidance of me? When Beatrice dropped me off, she squeezed my hand. "Whatever this is, Eleanor, you don't have to face it alone." But as I walked into my empty house, I felt more alone than ever, because I was beginning to suspect that the son I thought I knew, the life I thought he had, might all be an elaborate fiction.
and I was terrified to learn the truth.
The image of that woman leaving Julian's house haunted me for the next 2 days. I replayed it over and over in my mind, trying to make it mean something innocent, something explainable. A house cleaner? But house cleaners don't usually drive Mercedes coupes. A friend of Simone's? At 10:30 on a Monday morning when Julian should have been at work? Every innocent explanation crumbled under scrutiny, leaving only the possibilities I didn't want to consider. Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I hadn't touched when my phone rang. Not Julian. I hadn't heard from him since the disastrous visit, but my friend Margaret Chen from the book club. "Eleanor, I heard about your surgery from Beatrice. I'm so sorry I didn't know sooner. How are you feeling?" We talked for a while about my recovery, and Margaret shared that she'd had similar surgery 3 years ago. But then she said something that made my heart skip. "You know, I actually saw Julian last week. Thursday, I think it was. I was having lunch at that new bistro downtown, Meridian, and he was there with a woman. I almost went over to say hello, but they seemed intimate, deep in conversation. I assumed it must have been Simone, though I've only met her once and couldn't remember what she looked like." My mouth went dry. What did this woman look like? Oh, let's see. Dark hair, quite long, younger, maybe 30s, pretty. She was wearing a blue dress. I remember that. Why? Dark hair, younger. It could have been the same woman I'd seen leaving Julian's house. Margaret, what day was this, exactly? Thursday, I'm sure, because that's my standing lunch date with my sister. We always go on Thursdays. Thursday. The day before Julian and Simone were supposed to have left for Portland. The day before they'd supposedly been at a work conference all weekend. Were they... I struggled to find the words. Did they seem like colleagues, or... Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor, I don't want to spread gossip or cause trouble, but no, they didn't seem like colleagues. They were holding hands across the table, and when they left, he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Eleanor, are you all right? Maybe I shouldn't have said anything." "No," I managed. "No, I'm glad you told me. Thank you, Margaret." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Julian was having an affair. That's why he'd avoided the hospital. That's why he'd kept me away from his house for 11 months. That's why he and Simone had seemed so uncomfortable, so eager to leave during their visit. He was living a double life, and he'd been terrified I'd discover it. I picked up my phone and called Beatrice. "I need your help," I said without preamble. "Julian is having an affair." Beatrice arrived within minutes. I told her about Margaret's phone call, and we sat together trying to piece together what this meant. "So the woman at his house," Beatrice said slowly, "that must have been her, his mistress." The word felt ugly in my mouth. Mistress. My son had a mistress. "Does Simone know?" I wondered aloud. "That's the question, isn't it? Either she knows and they're in some kind of arrangement, or she doesn't know, and he's deceiving both of you." I thought about Simone's behavior during their visit, her defensiveness, her eagerness to leave, the ways she'd made excuses for Julian's absence. "I think she knows," I said slowly, "or at least suspects. That's why they both seemed so uncomfortable. They're afraid I'll find out." "What are you going to do?" I looked at Beatrice, this woman who had shown me more loyalty and care in the past 2 weeks than my own son had in months.
I'm going to find out exactly what is going on, and then I'm going to decide what to do about it. How? I need to see for myself. I need proof, not just suspicions and secondhand sightings. I paused, feeling a bit foolish. I need to go back to his house, watch it, see who comes and goes. Beatrice raised her eyebrows. You want to stake out your own son's house? I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy. It sounds like a mother who deserves to know the truth. Beatrice stood up decisively. When do we start? The next morning, Wednesday, we drove back to Riverside Heights. I'd dressed carefully in dark, nondescript clothing, feeling ridiculous like I was in some amateur spy movie. But this was my life, my family, and I had a right to know what was happening. We parked down the street from Julian's house, far enough away not to be obvious, but close enough to see clearly. Julian's BMW was gone. Presumably, he'd actually gone to work today, but the red Mercedes was in the driveway. She's living there, I said, the realization hitting me like a punch. She's not just visiting. She's living in his house. We sat and watched for 2 hours. At 11:30, the front door opened, and the dark-haired woman emerged. In daylight, I could see her more clearly. She was indeed young, early 30s at most, attractive in a casual way, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing running gear and had earbuds in. She jogged down the driveway and down the street, disappearing around a corner. She's comfortable there, Beatrice observed. That's not how someone acts in a house they're sneaking into. She's settled in. 15 minutes later, a delivery truck pulled up. The driver got out with several packages and left them on the front porch. I could see the labels from where we sat: Amazon, Nordstrom, Sephora. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. How are you feeling today, Mom? Hope recovery is going well. The casual tone, the routine check-in, as if his life was perfectly normal, as if he wasn't living a lie that involved a mistress in his home while his wife was... Where? Where was Simone?
I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I opened my Photos app and started looking through old pictures. I found one from last Thanksgiving, the last time I'd been to their house. Simone was in the photo, standing in their modern kitchen, her arm around Julian. She was smiling, but now that I looked closer, the smile didn't reach her eyes. Beatrice, where do you think Simone is? That's what I've been wondering. If this woman is living in the house, where's the wife? We sat with that question as the dark-haired woman jogged back into view, barely winded from her run. She went back into the house, and the door closed behind her. Around 1 p.m., another car pulled up, a silver Honda Civic. A man got out, youngish, maybe late 20s, carrying a laptop bag. He walked up to the door and rang the bell. The dark-haired woman answered, kissed him on the cheek, and let him in. Beatrice and I looked at each other. A friend? Beatrice suggested. But something about the easy familiarity of that kiss, the way he'd walked in without hesitation, suggested he was more than a casual visitor. We waited another hour. The man didn't leave. More pieces of a puzzle I couldn't quite see were falling into place, but the picture they were forming made no sense. Finally, around 2:30, we drove back to Bristow. My head was spinning with questions and implications. I need to find out who she is. I need to know what's really going on. Back home, I did something I'd never done before. I opened Facebook on my computer and searched for Julian's profile. I rarely used social media myself, but I knew Julian had an account. I'd seen Simone tag him in posts occasionally. His profile loaded, showing me a carefully curated version of his life. Photos of vacations, restaurant meals, his beautiful house and car. But as I scrolled back through the posts from the past year, I noticed something. Simone appeared less and less frequently.
The last photo with both of them together was from nearly 8 months ago. 8 months, right around the time Julian had stopped inviting me to their house. I clicked on Simone's profile next. It was set to private, but I could see her profile picture. Simone on a beach somewhere, alone, smiling at the camera. The photo was recent, I could tell by her hairstyle. Then I went to Julian's friend list and started scrolling, looking for anyone who might be the mystery woman. It took almost an hour, but finally, I found her, Natasha Berkeley. Her profile picture matched the woman I'd seen at the house. Dark hair, pretty, young. I clicked on her profile. It was partially public, showing me some basic information. She worked as a freelance graphic designer. She lived in Riverside Heights, and she was listed as in a relationship. With shaking hands, I scrolled through her photos. There weren't many publicly visible, but what I could see made my stomach turn. Photos of her in Julian's house. I recognized the modern kitchen, the distinctive light fixtures. Photos of her at restaurants I knew Julian frequented. And one photo, posted 3 months ago, that showed her hand with a delicate gold ring on her left hand, captioned simply with a heart emoji. She was wearing a ring. Not an engagement ring, but a ring on her left hand posted with a romantic caption. I sat back, my mind reeling. This wasn't just a casual affair. This was something more serious, more established. This woman was living in Julian's house, wearing jewelry that suggested commitment, posting photos that anyone could see. How had I not known? How had no one told me? My phone rang. It was my friend Patricia from the hospital, the nurse who'd noticed my low mood during recovery. "Eleanor, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to check on you. You seemed so down when I was there, and I've been thinking about you." Her kindness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Patricia, can I ask you something? If you discovered that someone you loved was living a lie, would you confront them, or would you gather more information first?" There was a pause. "That's a heavy question. Can you tell me more?" I found myself pouring out the whole story to this woman I barely knew. The hospital neglect, the mysterious woman, Margaret's sighting at the restaurant, the Facebook discovery. Patricia listened without interrupting. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Eleanor, I've been a nurse for 27 years. I've seen a lot of family dynamics, a lot of secrets that come out during health crises. My advice is get all the facts before you do anything, because once you confront him, you can't take it back. Once you force the truth into the open, everything changes. But living in ignorance isn't what I'm suggesting. I'm saying be strategic, know exactly what you're dealing with before you act, because my gut tells me this situation is more complicated than it appears." After we hung up, I thought about her words. More complicated. What could be more complicated than my son having an affair and lying about his entire life? Thursday morning, I woke with renewed determination. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what Julian was hiding. I called the office where Julian worked, Meridian Marketing Solutions. I'd been there once, years ago, for a company holiday party. "Meridian Marketing, how may I direct your call?" "Yes, I'm trying to reach Julian Whitfield, please." "Mr. Whitfield? I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitfield is no longer with the company." My heart stopped. What? "He left Meridian about 6 months ago. Would you like me to connect you with someone else in his former department?" No, thank you." I hung up, my hands shaking. 6 months. Julian had left his job 6 months ago and never told me. All those stories about being busy at work, about important meetings and long hours, had been lies. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my text messages with Julian. Now that I was looking for it, I could see the pattern. Vague responses when I asked about work. Deflection when I suggested we meet for lunch near his office. Excuses about being in meetings when I called during business hours. He'd been systematically lying to me for half a year. Maybe longer. I called Beatrice. Julian lost his job 6 months ago. Or quit. Either way, he's been lying about it this entire time. "Eleanor, I think it's time you hired a private investigator." "A private investigator? Isn't that extreme?" "Is it?
Your son has a mistress living in his house, he's lied about his employment, and he's kept you at arm's length for nearly a year. Something very wrong is happening, and you need someone who knows how to uncover the truth professionally." She was right. This had gone beyond what I could investigate on my own. I needed help. Beatrice recommended an investigator she'd heard about through a friend whose daughter had gone through a messy divorce. His name was Robert Chen, no relation to my friend Margaret, and he specialized in domestic investigations. I called his office that afternoon. His receptionist scheduled me for a consultation the next day. Friday morning, Beatrice drove me to Robert Chen's office in a nondescript building downtown. He was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that put me somewhat at ease. I told him everything: the hospital, the neglect, the mystery woman, the Facebook discovery, the revelation about Julian's job. Robert took notes, asked clarifying questions, and never once made me feel foolish for being in this situation. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said when I finished, "I'm going to be straight with you. What you're describing sounds more than a simple affair. The job loss, the women living in the house, the elaborate deception. This suggests your son's life has undergone some major changes that he's been hiding from you." "What kind of changes?" "That's what we need to find out. With your permission, I'd like to conduct surveillance, do some background checks, and compile a complete picture of what's actually happening. It will take about a week, maybe 2. "How much will this cost?" He quoted me a figure that made me wince. It was a significant chunk of my savings. But what price could I put on the truth? "Do it," I said. "I need to know what's happening." Robert nodded. "I'll start today. I'll need some information from you. Addresses, phone numbers, any details you can provide about the woman and about your son's daily routine." I gave him everything I knew: Julian's address, Natasha Berkeley's name, the make and model of her car, the restaurants where they'd been seen. It felt surreal hiring someone to investigate my own child. The next week was one of the longest of my life. My physical recovery was progressing well. I could move around more easily, the pain was manageable, but emotionally I was in turmoil. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from Julian, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. He was still maintaining the charade, still checking in with his routine "How are you feeling?" messages, still pretending everything was normal. I responded minimally, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. "Fine. Better every day. Thanks for checking in." On Tuesday, Robert called. "Mrs. Whitfield, I have some preliminary findings. Can you come to my office?" Beatrice drove me there immediately. Robert had a folder on his desk, thick with papers and photographs. "I'm going to walk you through what I've discovered," he said gently. "Some of this may be difficult to hear." He opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. The first showed Julian leaving his house in the morning with Natasha. They were both dressed casually, holding coffee cups, looking like any normal couple starting their day. "This was taken Monday morning," Robert said. "I followed them to a cafe where they had breakfast together. Then they went to a yoga studio where they both attended a class. After that, they went grocery shopping together at Whole Foods." He showed me photos of them doing mundane domestic things: shopping for produce, laughing over something on Julian's phone, loading groceries into his car. "They're living together," I said unnecessarily. "Yes, but there's more." Robert pulled out another set of photos. "This is from Tuesday. The man you saw arriving at the house, his name is Marcus Devereaux. He's Natasha's brother." "Her brother?" "Yes. He visits frequently. He and Natasha appear to be close. But that's not the interesting part." Robert pulled out a document. I did a background check on Natasha Berkeley. 32 years old, originally from Seattle, moved to Riverside Heights about 8 months ago. And Mrs. Whitfield, she's not married. She's never been married. "But the ring?" "The ring on her left hand is likely a promise ring or just jewelry. There's no marriage record anywhere in the state." I tried to process this. So she and Julian aren't married? Correct. But I found something else. He pulled out another document, and this one made my blood run cold. "I checked property records for your son's house. As of 7 months ago, Simone Whitfield is no longer listed as an owner. Julian sold her his share of the house.
They legally divided their assets. They're divorced? Not quite. They filed for divorce 9 months ago. It was finalized 7 months ago. The settlement was relatively amicable. They divided assets, no alimony, no contested property. Simone got her own condo in Riverside Heights, and Julian kept the house. 9 months ago. Almost a year. Julian had been divorced for 7 months and never told me. Where is Simone now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper.
I picked up my phone and scrolled through my text messages with Julian. Now that I was looking for it, I could see the pattern. Vague responses when I asked about work. Deflection when I suggested we meet for lunch near his office. Excuses about being in meetings when I called during business hours. He'd been systematically lying to me for half a year, maybe longer. I called Beatrice. Julian lost his job 6 months ago. Or quit. Either way, he's been lying about it this entire time. Eleanor, I think it's time you hired a private investigator. A private investigator? Isn't that extreme? Is it? Your son has a mistress living in his house, he's lied about his employment, and he's kept you at arm's length for nearly a year. Something very wrong is happening, and you need someone who knows how to uncover the truth professionally. She was right. This had gone beyond what I could investigate on my own. I needed help. Beatrice recommended an investigator she'd heard about through a friend whose daughter had gone through a messy divorce. His name was Robert Chen, no relation to my friend Margaret, and he specialized in domestic investigations. I called his office that afternoon. His receptionist scheduled me for a consultation the next day. Friday morning, Beatrice drove me to Robert Chen's office in a nondescript building downtown. He was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that put me somewhat at ease. I told him everything. The hospital, the neglect, the mystery woman, the Facebook discovery, the revelation about Julian's job. Robert took notes, asked clarifying questions, and never once made me feel foolish for being in this situation. Mrs. Whitfield, he said when I finished, I'm going to be straight with you. What you're describing sounds more than a simple affair. The job loss, the women living in the house, the elaborate deception. This suggests your son's life has undergone some major changes that he's been hiding from you. What kind of changes? That's what we need to find out. With your permission, I'd like to conduct surveillance, do some background checks, and compile a complete picture of what's actually happening. It will take about a week, maybe 2. How much will this cost? He quoted me a figure that made me wince. It was a significant chunk of my savings. But what price could I put on the truth? Do it, I said. I need to know what's happening. Robert nodded. I'll start today. I'll need some information from you. Addresses, phone numbers, any details you can provide about the woman and about your son's daily routine. I gave him everything I knew. Julian's address, Natasha Berkeley's name, the make and model of her car, the restaurants where they'd been seen. It felt surreal hiring someone to investigate my own child. The next week was one of the longest of my life. My physical recovery was progressing well. I could move around more easily, the pain was manageable, but emotionally I was in turmoil. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from Julian, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. He was still maintaining the charade, still checking in with his routine, "How are you feeling?" messages, still pretending everything was normal. I responded minimally, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. Fine. Better every day. Thanks for checking in. On Tuesday, Robert called. Mrs. Whitfield, I have some preliminary findings. Can you come to my office? Beatrice drove me there immediately. Robert had a folder on his desk, thick with papers and photographs. I'm going to walk you through what I've discovered, he said gently. Some of this may be difficult to hear. He opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. The first showed Julian leaving his house in the morning with Natasha. They were both dressed casually, holding coffee cups, looking like any normal couple starting their day. This was taken Monday morning, Robert said. I followed them to a cafe where they had breakfast together. Then they went to a yoga studio where they both attended a class. After that, they went grocery shopping together at Whole Foods. He showed me photos of them doing mundane domestic things.
shopping for produce, laughing over something on Julian's phone, loading groceries into his car. They're living together, I said unnecessarily. Yes, but there's more. Robert pulled out another set of photos. This is from Tuesday. The man you saw arriving at the house, his name is Marcus Devereaux. He's Natasha's brother. Her brother? Yes. He visits frequently. He and Natasha appear to be close. But that's not the interesting part. Robert pulled out a document. I did a background check on Natasha Berkeley. 32 years old, originally from Seattle, moved to Riverside Heights about 8 months ago. And Mrs. Whitfield, she's not married. She's never been married. But the ring... The ring on her left hand is likely a promise ring or just jewelry. There's no marriage record anywhere in the state. I tried to process this. So she and Julian aren't married. Correct. But I found something else. He pulled out another document, and this one made my blood run cold. I checked property records for your son's house. As of 7 months ago, Simone Whitfield is no longer listed as an owner. Julian sold her his share of the house. They legally divided their assets. They're divorced? Not quite. They filed for divorce 9 months ago. It was finalized 7 months ago. The settlement was relatively amicable. They divided assets, no alimony, no contested property. Simone got her own condo in Riverside Heights, and Julian kept the house. 9 months ago. Almost a year. Julian had been divorced for 7 months and never told me. Where is Simone now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper.
Living in her condo. She's still working at the same company. From what I can tell, she and Julian have a cordial relationship. They were seen having coffee together last week, actually. Friendly, no animosity. Robert showed me more photos. Simone and Julian sitting at an outdoor cafe, talking and smiling. Like friends. Like a divorced couple who'd managed to stay on good terms. So all this time, I said slowly, when he's been mentioning Simone when they came to visit me together, they were already divorced? Yes. They attended your visit together, which suggests they're maintaining some kind of united front, possibly to avoid difficult conversations with family. Like telling his mother that his marriage had ended. What else? I asked, because I could tell Robert was holding something back. He hesitated. Mrs. Whitfield, I need to tell you about your son's employment situation. As you discovered, he left Meridian Marketing 6 months ago. What you don't know is why. He was fired? No, he quit. But I spoke to a contact I have at the company, someone in HR who was willing to talk off the record. Julian was having a very public relationship with Natasha, who was a contract designer at the company. When his marriage to Simone fell apart, it created an uncomfortable situation at work. Rather than cause more drama, he chose to leave. So he gave up his job for her? It appears so. But, Mrs. Whitfield, that's not the end of the story. Julian hasn't been unemployed this whole time. He started his own consulting business about 5 months ago. A one-man operation, working from home, doing freelance marketing consulting. From what I can gather, he's doing reasonably well. Not making what he made at Meridian, but enough to maintain his lifestyle. I sat back, overwhelmed by the avalanche of information. My son had gotten divorced, left his job, started a new business, moved his girlfriend into his house, and created an entirely new life, all without telling me any of it. Why? I asked Robert, though I knew he couldn't answer. Why would he hide all of this from me? Robert's expression was sympathetic. That's a question only your son can answer. But if I had to guess, he was probably ashamed. Divorce carries a stigma for some people, especially if they think their parents will be disappointed. He might have been planning to tell you eventually, once he had everything sorted out in his new life. Or he might have been hoping you'd never need to know. He came to visit me with Simone? I said, still trying to wrap my head around it. They both came. They pretended they were still married. Yes, which suggests they discussed it beforehand and agreed to maintain the fiction, at least temporarily. I thought about that visit. The awkwardness, the way they'd both been on edge. Of course they had been. They'd been performing a lie, terrified I'd ask questions they couldn't answer without revealing the truth. "Is there anything else?" I asked. Robert pulled out one final document. I did a deep dive into Julian's finances, just the public records I could access legally. His business seems legitimate and reasonably successful. His mortgage is current. He has no significant debts. From a financial standpoint, he appears to be managing fine, despite the major life changes. So, at least he wasn't in financial trouble. That was something. "Mrs. Whitfield, I can continue surveillance if you'd like, but I think I've given you the main picture. Your son is living with his girlfriend, he's divorced from Simone, he runs his own business from home, and he's been maintaining an elaborate deception to keep you from knowing any of this." "For 9 months?" I said dully. "He's been lying to me for 9 months." "Yes." I thanked Robert, paid him for his services, and walked out to where Beatrice was waiting in the car. I sat in the passenger seat and stared straight ahead. "What did you find out?" Beatrice asked gently. "Everything," I said. "I found out everything." On the drive home, I told Beatrice everything Robert had revealed. She listened in stunned silence. "He brought his ex-wife to visit you in your living room and pretended they were still married," she said when I finished. Eleanor, that's beyond thoughtless. That's calculated deception." "He didn't want me to know his life had fallen apart. Or maybe he didn't think it had fallen apart. Maybe he was happy with these changes. But either way, he decided I didn't deserve to know the truth." "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? Now that I knew the truth, now that I understood why Julian had been avoiding me, why he'd seemed so uncomfortable, why he kept me away from his house, what was I going to do about it? "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to confront him immediately, to call him right now and tell him I know everything. But another part of me thinks... What? Another part of me thinks that if he can lie to me for 9 months, through my surgery and recovery, through one of the most vulnerable times of my life, then maybe I need to be strategic about this. Maybe I need to think carefully about what I want the outcome to be before I force this confrontation. Beatrice nodded slowly. "That's wise. Because once you confront him, you can't take it back. Your relationship will change forever." "It's already changed," I said quietly. I just didn't know it yet.
That night, I sat in my living room with all the information Robert had given me spread out on my coffee table. Photos of Julian and Natasha looking happy together, documents showing the divorce, the property transfers, the business filings. Evidence of a whole life I'd known nothing about. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Hey, Mom, hope you're feeling stronger. Thinking about you." Heart emoji. I stared at that heart emoji, that casual expression of affection from someone who'd been systematically lying to me for 3/4 of a year. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I didn't feel sad or hurt or confused. I felt angry. My son had decided I wasn't worthy of the truth. He'd decided that maintaining his comfortable lie was more important than honoring my right to know what was happening in his life. He'd brought his ex-wife to visit me, sat in my living room, and performed a charade because it was easier than having an honest conversation. And when I'd needed him most, when I'd been lying in a hospital bed recovering from surgery, he'd sent text messages because actually showing up, actually being present, would have risked exposing his lies. He'd chosen his deception over my well-being. I picked up my phone and typed a response. "We need to talk, in person, this week." His reply came almost immediately. "Is everything okay?" "No,"
I typed back. Everything is not okay, and it hasn't been for a long time. There was a longer pause this time. Then, I can come by tomorrow evening, around 6? Fine. Come alone. Why? What's this about? You know exactly what it's about, Julian. I sent that message and then turned off my phone. Let him sit with that for the next 24 hours. Let him wonder what I knew, how I'd found out, what I was going to say. Because tomorrow evening, my son was going to get the confrontation he'd been avoiding for 9 months. And this time, I wasn't going to let him off with vague excuses and diversionary tactics. This time, he was going to tell me the truth. All of it. Whether he wanted to or not. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every minute felt like an hour as I prepared myself for the conversation that would change everything. I'd spent the morning organizing all the evidence Robert had given me, the photographs, the documents, the timeline of lies, laying it out on my dining room table like a prosecuting attorney preparing for trial. Beatrice came by around noon with lunch I couldn't eat. "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" she asked for the 3rd time. "I could stay, just be in the other room in case you need support." "No," I said firmly. "This is between Julian and me. He needs to face what he's done without an audience." "What are you going to say to him?" I looked at the evidence spread across my cable. 9 months of deception. A divorce he'd hidden. A whole new life he'd built in secret. I'm going to tell him the truth. That he's broken my trust in a way I don't know if I can forgive. And then I'm going to listen to whatever excuses he tries to offer. And then, I paused, feeling the weight of what was coming. Then I'm going to tell him what happens next. Do you know what happens next? Not yet, I admitted, but I'll know after I hear what he has to say. Beatrice left around 4, making me promise to call her as soon as Julian was gone. I spent the next 2 hours in a strange state of calm. The anger I'd felt last night had crystallized into something harder, colder. A determination to not be manipulated, to not accept half-truths or deflections, to demand the respect I deserved as his mother. At 5:59, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I watched Julian get out of his BMW. He was alone, as I'd demanded. He walked to my door slowly, like a man approaching his own sentencing. I opened the door before he could knock. "Mom," he said, his face a mixture of anxiety and forced cheerfulness, "you said we needed to talk? Come in." He followed me into the living room, and I could see his eyes immediately drawn to the dining room table, to the spread of documents and photographs visible from where we stood. His face went pale. "Sit down, Julian." He sat, his movements stiff and mechanical. I remained standing, needing the physical advantage, needing him to understand that this conversation would happen on my terms. "Mom, Don't," I cut him off. "Don't speak yet. You're going to listen first. You've had 9 months to talk to me, to tell me the truth. Now it's my turn." Julian closed his mouth, his hands gripping his knees. I walked to the dining room table and picked up the divorce papers. "You and Simone got divorced 7 months ago. You filed 9 months ago. You've been legally separated for almost a year." Julian's face crumbled. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you never told me. You let me believe you were still married, you brought Simone to my house, sat in my living room, and acted out a complete lie because it was easier than telling me the truth. Mom, I was going to tell you. When? When were you going to tell me, Julian? After another year of lies? After 5 years? Never?" He didn't know how. He didn't know how to say, "Mom, Simone and I are getting divorced." It's 8 words. You couldn't manage 8 words in 9 months? He looked down at his hands. I was ashamed. Ashamed. Ashamed that your marriage ended, so you decided lying to your mother was the solution? I picked up another document. You left your job at Meridian 6 months ago. Started your own consulting business. That's admirable, actually. It takes courage to strike out on your own. But you lied about that too. All those stories about being busy at work, about meetings and long hours. All lies. I didn't want you to worry about my finances. I'm your mother, Julian. Worrying about you is my job. But you took away my right to even do that by lying about your entire life. I picked up the photographs of him with Natasha. Her name is Natasha Berkeley, 32 years old. She's been living in your house for 8 months. You're in a relationship with her. A serious relationship from the looks of it. Julian's jaw tightened. Have you been spying on me? Don't you dare, I said, my voice sharp as a blade. Don't you dare make this about my actions when you've been systematically deceiving me for months. Yes, I hired a private investigator because my son had become a stranger who avoided me, lied to me, and made me feel like I was crazy for thinking something was wrong. I wasn't trying to hurt you. But you did. The words exploded out of me. You hurt me in ways you can't even understand. Do you know what it felt like lying in that hospital bed, recovering from surgery, and getting nothing but text messages from you? Do you know how humiliating it was when my neighbor showed more concern than my own son? I'm sorry about the hospital. You're sorry? You're sorry? I felt tears stinging my eyes but refused to let them fall. Julian, I went through emergency surgery. I was terrified and in pain and alone. And you sent me emojis. You offered to reimburse my taxi fare. You made me feel like my health crisis was an inconvenience in your busy schedule. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Make me understand how the son I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for, could treat his mother with such callous indifference. Julian's face was red now, shame and defensiveness warring in his expression. I couldn't come to the hospital because I was afraid you'd ask about Simone. I was afraid the truth would come out and I wasn't ready to deal with it. I know that makes me a coward. I know that was wrong, but I was overwhelmed with everything happening in my life and I couldn't handle one more difficult conversation. So you chose your comfort over my well-being. You chose avoiding an awkward conversation over being there when your mother needed you most. I shook my head. Do you understand what you did to our relationship? Do you understand that you've broken something that might never be repaired? Mom, please. And even after the hospital, even after you knew how hurt I was, you continued lying. You came here with Simone and performed a charade. You sat in my living room and lied to my face because it was easier than telling the truth. Julian stood up abruptly. What do you want me to say? Yes, I lied. Yes, I handled everything badly. Yes, I was a coward. I admit all of it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What else can I say? You can tell me why. Why you thought I deserved to be kept in the dark. Why you thought I was someone who couldn't handle the truth. Why you treated me like a stranger instead of my mother. Julian ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from his childhood. Because I was afraid of disappointing you. My whole life, you had such high expectations. You sacrificed so much to give me opportunities, and I wanted to make you proud. I wanted to be the successful son with the perfect marriage and the great career. And when those things fell apart, I couldn't face telling you. I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes. So I thought if I could rebuild everything first, if I could show you that I was okay, that I'd landed on my feet, then maybe I could tell you about the divorce and you'd see that it all worked out fine. But it hasn't worked out fine because you've built your new life on a foundation of lies and you've damaged our relationship in ways that success or happiness can't fix. Julian sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. I know I've screwed everything up. Tell me about Natasha. He looked up surprised. What? Tell me about her. If you're going to have this whole new life, I deserve to know who's in it." Julian hesitated, then said, "We met at work. She was doing contract design work for Meridian. We became friends and then more than friends. The marriage with Simone was already failing. We'd been growing apart for years, if I'm honest. Natasha didn't cause the divorce, but she did make me realize what a real connection could feel like." "Do you love her?" "Yes, I do. She's kind and creative, and she makes me happy in ways Simone never did." "And does she know you've been lying to your mother for 9 months?" Julian's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought. So you've built this new life on hiding who you really are from the people who matter. That's not a strong foundation, Julian. She knows about you. She knows you're important to me. If I were important to you, you would have told me the truth. If I were important to you, you would have visited me in the hospital. If I were important to you, you wouldn't have made me feel like a burden every time I needed something from you. You're not a burden. Then why did you treat me like one? Why did every interaction feel like I was imposing on your time? Why did you make me feel like my needs were less important than your dinner plans?" Julian had no answer. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of 9 months of lies pressing down on us both.
Finally, I said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave now, you're going to go home, and think about what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Because the old relationship, the one where I made all the effort and accepted whatever scraps of attention you threw my way, that relationship is over." "Mom, I'm not finished. If you want to have a relationship with me, a real relationship built on honesty and mutual respect, then you need to decide that. You need to choose it actively, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because you genuinely want me in your life." "I do want you in my life." "Then prove it, not with words, but with actions. Show me that I matter to you. Show me that you value our relationship enough to put in real effort. And if you can't do that, if you realize that you don't actually want a close relationship with your mother, then at least have the courage to tell me that honestly, so I can stop hoping for something that will never exist." Julian's eyes were red now, tears threatening to spill over. "You're my mother. Of course I want you in my life." Wanting and doing are two different things, Julian. You've wanted to tell me the truth for 9 months, but you didn't do it. So I need you to decide what you're actually willing to do, not just what you think you should want. I walked to the front door and opened it. "Go home. Think about what I've said. And when you're ready to have an honest conversation about our relationship, call me. But don't text me. Don't send me casual check-in messages pretending everything is fine. Either commit to being present in my life or have the decency to step back so we both know where we stand." Julian stood slowly, looking like he wanted to say something, to argue or apologize or make promises. But he must have seen something in my face that told him this wasn't the time. He walked to the door, paused, then said quietly, "I really am sorry, Mom, for all of it. I know you are, but sorry isn't enough. Not this time." He left and I closed the door behind him. I stood in my quiet house, feeling the absence of my son more keenly than I had in the hospital, more painfully than any physical wound. The truth was out now. The lies were exposed. And I had no idea what would come next. 3 months later. I'm sitting in my garden on a warm December afternoon, the late autumn sun gentle on my face. The recovery from surgery is long behind me now. I'm back to my normal activities, tending to my garden, attending book club meetings, having coffee with Margaret and Beatrice. My relationship with Julian is different. After that confrontation, he didn't contact me for 2 weeks. When he finally did, it was a phone call, not a text. He asked if he could visit, if he could introduce me to Natasha properly, if we could start over with honesty as our foundation. I said yes. The visit was awkward at first.
Natasha was nervous, clearly aware of the circumstances of our meeting, but she was kind and genuine, and I could see why Julian loved her. More importantly, I could see that she made him happy in a way Simone never had. We talked for 3 hours that day. Really talked. Julian told me about the breakdown of his marriage, about his decision to leave Meridian, about his fears and hopes for the future. I told him about the pain his deception had caused, about the loneliness of recovery, about my own fears of being forgotten and discarded. It wasn't a magic fix. Trust once broken doesn't heal overnight. But it was a beginning. Julian now visits twice a week. Real visits, not obligatory check-ins. We have dinner together, we talk about our lives. We're slowly rebuilding what was broken. He's introduced me to his new business partners. He's brought Natasha to my book club. He's making an effort, a real effort, to include me in his new life. Is it what it was before? No. Our relationship has changed fundamentally. I no longer see him through the rose-colored lens of motherly devotion that excuses all flaws. I see him as he is, a complicated, flawed human being who made terrible choices, but who is trying to do better. And I've changed too. I'm no longer willing to accept whatever crumbs of attention he offers. I've learned to value myself enough to demand respect, to expect honesty, to walk away from relationships that don't serve me. Simone and I had coffee last month. She reached out, apologizing for her part in the deception. She explained that Julian had begged her to maintain the fiction just a little longer, and she'd agreed out of misplaced loyalty to their past. She's happy now, in her new condo, with her new life. She's dating someone, a kind man, who teaches high school history. We're not close, but we're friendly, which is more than I expected. The biggest surprise has been my friendship with Natasha. She calls me Eleanor, not Mrs. Whitfield, and treats me like a person, not like Julian's mother. She asks my advice on her design work. She brings me books she thinks I'll enjoy. Last week, she mentioned that she and Julian are thinking about getting engaged and asked if I'd like to help her plan the wedding. It's strange building a relationship with the woman who was part of the reason for Julian's deception. But I've come to realize that Natasha wasn't the problem. Julian's inability to be honest, his fear of disappointing me, his choice to lie rather than face difficult truths, those were the real problems. Natasha is just a woman who fell in love with a complicated man. Beatrice comes through my garden gate now, carrying 2 cups of tea from the cafe down the street. She's become more than a neighbor over these months. She's family, the kind you choose, rather than the kind you're born with. "Beautiful day," she says, settling into the chair beside me. Beautiful day, I agree.